My name is Evan Callahan, and I should have seen it coming. But when you're hammering nails into 2x4s at 6 in the morning, thinking about mortgage payments and whether your wife remembered to buy coffee, you don't exactly expect your entire life to explode like a cheap firework at a backyard barbecue. The workshop behind our house had become my sanctuary over the past year. Leah called it my man cave, but it was really just where I went when the silence in our kitchen got too loud. She'd be on her phone, texting clients about open houses and property showings, while I'd be sketching plans for kitchen renovations or bathroom remodels. We were like two ships passing in the night, except one ship was apparently steering straight toward an iceberg named Brent Garrison. Brent, my so-called best friend since high school. The guy who'd been my best man, who came over every Sunday to watch football and drink my beer. The mortgage broker who'd helped us refinance our house last spring, sitting at our kitchen table with his laptop and his $1,000,000 smile, explaining interest rates while Leah hung on his every word. I should have noticed the signs earlier. The way Leah started dressing up for client meetings that lasted until midnight. The new lingerie that appeared in our laundry basket. Black lace things that never seemed to make it onto her body when I was around. The sudden interest in yoga classes that apparently didn't exist at the gym she claimed to attend. But I was busy. My contracting business was finally taking off after 3 years of scraping by. I had a crew of 4 guys now, and we were booked solid through the fall. Houses in our upstate New York town were selling like hotcakes, and everyone wanted renovations before they moved in. I was working 12-hour days, coming home exhausted and covered in sawdust, grateful just to collapse on the couch with a beer and whatever leftovers Leah had saved me. The morning of Brent's barbecue party started like any other Saturday. I was in the workshop by 7, sanding down cabinet doors for the Morrison job, when Leah appeared in the doorway wearing a sundress I'd never seen before. Yellow with tiny flowers. It made her look younger, prettier, happy in a way she hadn't looked in months. "You're coming to Brent's party today, right?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "He's been planning this for weeks." I looked up from my work. "Wouldn't miss it. What's the occasion again?" "He got that promotion at the bank, vice president of lending." She was smiling, but something flickered in her eyes. "Melanie's so excited. She's been cooking for days." Melanie, Brent's wife of 8 years, sweet, trusting Melanie, who baked cookies for the neighborhood kids and organized charity drives for the animal shelter. If she only knew what her husband had been up to, she'd probably feed him to the rescue dogs herself. But I didn't know that yet, not for certain. "I'll be there," I said, turning back to my sanding. "Just need to finish these doors." Leah lingered in the doorway for a moment longer, like she wanted to say something else. Then she was gone, her footsteps clicking across the concrete floor of the garage. The party was set for 4 o'clock at Brent's place on Maple Ridge, the fancy neighborhood where all the successful people lived. Big houses with 3-car garages and swimming pools, perfectly manicured lawns that probably cost more to maintain than I made in a month. Brent had bought the house 2 years ago, right after he started pulling in the big commissions from the housing boom. I showed up at 4:30, fashionably late with a case of beer and wearing my least paint-stained shirt. The backyard was already packed with people I recognized from around town. There was Jim Patterson from the hardware store, the Kowalskis from down the street, a bunch of Brent's co-workers from First National Bank. Maybe 40 people total, all clustered around the massive deck that overlooked Brent's kidney-shaped pool. Brent himself was holding court by the grill, wearing a polo shirt that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. He spotted me immediately and waved me over with the kind of enthusiasm that should have set off alarm bells. "Evan, there's the man of the hour." He clapped me on the back hard enough to rattle my teeth. "Glad you could make it, buddy." "Wouldn't miss celebrating your success," I said, handing him the beer. "Congratulations on the promotion." His smile was too wide, too bright, like a shark that had just spotted a wounded seal. "Thanks, man. Really means a lot coming from you." I found Leah by the pool, talking to Jesse Morrison and Allison Chen. They were all holding wine glasses and laughing at something on Jesse's phone. When Leah saw me approaching, she quickly put her hand on her stomach, a gesture so brief I almost missed it. Almost. "Ladies," I said, nodding to the group, "enjoying the party?" "Oh, it's wonderful," gushed Allison. Brent and Melanie really outdid themselves. Jesse was grinning like the cat that ate the canary. "We were just talking about how exciting this summer has been for everyone." "Exciting how?" I asked. The three women exchanged glances. Leah's cheeks were flushed, whether from wine or something else, I couldn't tell. Just life changes, Leah said carefully. New opportunities. Before I could ask what she meant, Brent's voice boomed across the yard. Everyone, can I have your attention for a minute? The crowd quieted down, turning toward the deck where Brent stood with a beer raised high. Melanie was beside him, beaming with pride. The perfect suburban couple, celebrating their perfect suburban success. I wanted to thank you all for coming today, Brent continued. This promotion means the world to me, and having all my friends and neighbors here to let us celebrate makes it even more special. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. But that's not the only reason we're celebrating today, Brent said, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Leah. It seems like this is a day for big announcements. My stomach dropped. I felt it like a physical thing, like stepping off a cliff in the dark. Leah stepped forward, her hand moving to her stomach again. This time, she left it there. I'm pregnant, she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent yard. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Melanie squealed with delight and rushed over to hug Leah. People started pressing forward, offering congratulations, asking when she was due, whether we knew if it was a boy or a girl. But I was watching Brent, and Brent was watching me with that same shark smile, waiting for something. That's when he delivered the eliminating blow. Congratulations, Evan, he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Though I guess I should be congratulating myself, shouldn't I? The crowd went quiet again, confused. I felt like I was underwater, everything distant and muffled. What do you mean? Someone asked. Brent's grin widened. I mean, I've been doing his wife for over a year, and he didn't even notice. Pretty pathetic, right? The baby's mine, folks. Poor Evan here is about to raise another man's kid. The silence was deafening. 40 people staring at me, waiting to see if I'd crumble, if I'd cry, if I'd throw a punch, or just run away with my tail between my legs. Instead, I started laughing. Not a bitter laugh or a broken laugh, but genuine amusement. Because in that moment, looking at Brent's smug face and Leah's guilty expression and all those people waiting for me to fall apart, I realized something beautiful. I'd been planning for this moment for 3 months. I raised my beer bottle high, matching Brent's pose. Well, since we're making announcements, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the yard, I guess I should share my own news. Brent's smile faltered slightly. Congratulations, Brent. You're going to be a grandfather. The confusion on his face was priceless. Your daughter Sarah is 8 weeks pregnant, just like I've been doing your little girl for the past 6 months while she's been home from college. Surprise. The crowd gasped. Melanie's face went white, and Brent looked like he'd been hit by a truck. You're lying, he whispered. Am I? Sarah's in the kitchen right now, probably wondering if she should come out here and confirm it herself. She's been texting me all week, worried about how to tell you. That's when the sirens started. 3 police cars came screaming up Maple Ridge Drive, red and blue lights flashing. The crowd scattered as the cops poured into the backyard, led by Detective Ray Salerno, a guy I'd known since we were kids. Brent Garrison, Salerno called out, you're under arrest for attack and battery. Brent's face went from pale to green. What? That's impossible. Bar fight last night at Murphy's Tavern. 3 witnesses identified you. You broke a guy's nose over a poker game. As the cops cuffed Brent and read him his rights, I caught Salerno's eye. He gave me the slightest nod, a signal we'd arranged 3 days ago when I'd tipped him off about Brent's little altercation at the bar. The party was over. People were grabbing their purses and heading for the exits, already pulling out their phones to spread the gossip. Leah stood frozen by the pool, her hand still on her stomach, staring at me like she'd never seen me before. I walked over to her, close enough that only she could hear. Did you really think I didn't know? I whispered. I'm a contractor, Leah. I notice when things don't fit together properly. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. This isn't over, she finally managed. I smiled and finished my beer. You're absolutely right. It's just getting started. The fallout from Brent's barbecue spread through town like wildfire. By Sunday morning, half the neighborhood knew that my wife was pregnant with my best friend's baby, and the other half knew that I'd been sleeping with his 19-year-old daughter. The fact that only one of those things was actually true didn't seem to matter much to the gossip mill. I was in my workshop by 6 a.m., trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of measuring and cutting lumber for the Henderson kitchen project. But my phone kept buzzing with texts from people I hadn't heard from in months, all wanting to know if the rumors were true. Frankie DeLuca showed up around 8 with coffee and donuts from Murphy's Bakery. Frankie was my lead carpenter, a stocky Italian guy in his 50s who'd been working construction since he was 16. He'd also done 3 years in the Marines and 6 months in county lockup for beating the hell out of a guy who'd been hitting his sister. If I was going to war, Frankie was exactly the kind of ally I wanted in my corner. "Jesus, boss," he said, setting the coffee on my workbench. "Whole town's talking about you this morning." "Good things, I hope," I said, not looking up for my measurements. "Well, it depends on your definition of good. Most folks think you got screwed over pretty bad, but there's some saying you had it coming, being married to a woman like that." I finally looked up. "A woman like what?" Frankie shrugged. "You know, ambitious, prettier than she has any right to be, the kind of woman who's always looking for something better." He wasn't wrong. Leah had married me when I was just starting out, when my business was nothing more than me in a pickup truck full of tools. Back then, she'd seemed content to be the wife of a small-town contractor. But as her real estate career took off and she started making more money than me, things changed. She started talking about moving to a bigger house, taking vacations we couldn't afford, keeping up with people like Brent and Melanie. "So what's the plan?" Frankie asked. "Plan for what?" "Come on, boss. I've been working for you for 3 years. I know that look. You're plotting something." He was right, of course. I'd been plotting for months, ever since I'd first suspected what was going on between Leah and Brent. See, the thing about being a contractor is that you learn to be methodical. You don't just tear down a wall without knowing what's behind it. You don't start a foundation without surveying the ground, and you definitely don't go to war without doing your reconnaissance first. "First things first," I said, pulling out my phone. "We need to make sure yesterday's little revelation has the right impact." I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Mrs. Beatrice Kowalski, 73 years old and the unofficial information hub of our entire neighborhood. If you wanted news to spread fast and far, you told B. Kowalski. She answered on the second ring. "Evan, honey, I was hoping you'd call. How are you holding up after yesterday?" "I'm doing fine, Mrs. K. Actually, I was calling to clear something up. I think there might be some confusion about what happened at the party." "Oh? Well, I don't want people thinking I actually, with Brent's daughter. That was just me being dramatic. But the thing about Leah and Brent, that's all true. I've got proof if anyone wants to see it." The silence on the other end told me she was processing this information, probably already planning who to call first. "What kind of proof, dear?" "Hotel receipts, photos of them together, text messages, the whole 9 yards. None of that was actually true, but Mrs. K didn't need to know that. The important thing was getting the story straight before Leah and Brent had a chance to spin it their way. After I hung up, Frankie was grinning at me. "You're a devious fool, you know that?" I prefer to think of myself as thorough. We spent the rest of the morning working on the Henderson project, but my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about Leah, probably waking up hungover and panicked in our bed. I was thinking about Brent, sitting in a jail cell and wondering how his perfect life had gone to hell so fast. And I was thinking about what came next. Around noon, my phone rang. "Leah, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "I'm working. Evan, please, this is important." I looked at Frankie, who was pretending not to listen while he measured trim pieces. "Fine, but not at the house. Meet me at Murphy's Tavern in an hour." Murphy's was the kind of place where blue-collar guys went to drink beer and complain about their lives. It wasn't Leah's scene at all, which was exactly why I'd chosen it. I wanted her off balance, uncomfortable, out of her element. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth and looking completely out of place in her designer jeans and silk blouse. The lunch crowd was mostly construction workers and retirees, and they were all stealing glances at her while pretending to watch the baseball game on TV. I slid into the booth across from her and signaled the bartender for a beer. "You look like hell," I said. She did. Her eyes were red and puffy, her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. For the first time in years, she looked her age. "How long have you known?" she asked. "About you and Brent?" "Officially, about 3 months. Unofficially, I started suspecting around Christmas." She flinched. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I wanted to be sure, and because I wanted to figure out what I was going to do about it." The bartender brought my beer. I took a long pull while Leah fidgeted with her wedding ring. "The baby is his," she said quietly. "I figured. But what you said about his daughter, that was just to hurt him, right? You didn't really..." I let the silence stretch out, watching her squirm. Finally, I smiled. Sarah Garrison is a sweet kid. She's also a lesbian who's been dating the same girl for 2 years. But Brent doesn't know that because he's too self-absorbed to pay attention to his own family. Relief flooded her face. So you were lying. About that, yes. About knowing you've been screwing my best friend for over a year? Not so much. She leaned back in the booth, studying my face. You're not the same person I married. Neither are you. We sat there for a moment, the weight of 8 years of marriage hanging between us like a funeral shroud. What happens now? She asked. Now? Now you move out of my house. You find yourself a lawyer. And you pray that I'm feeling generous when it comes time to divide our assets. Her eyes flashed with anger. Your house? I've been paying half the mortgage for 4 years. With money you made selling houses to clients I referred to you? Funny how that works. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This isn't over, Evan. You're right, I said, raising my beer in a mock toast. It's not. After she left, I sat in the bar for another hour, nursing my beer and thinking. The lunch crowd thinned out, replaced by the usual collection of afternoon drinkers and retirees with nothing better to do. I was just about to leave when Detective Salerno walked in. Ray looked like a cop. Thick build, graying hair, tired eyes that had seen too much. He'd been working the same beat for 15 years, and nothing much surprised him anymore. He spotted me immediately and walked over. Mind if I sit? He asked. Free country? He slid into the booth Leah had vacated and signaled for a coffee. Hell of a thing yesterday. Which part? All of it. But especially the timing of our little visit to Brent's party. I met his eyes. Funny how that worked out. Funny. He agreed. Almost like someone knew we'd be looking for him. Almost. Ray had been 2 years ahead of me in high school, but we'd run in the same circles. He knew I wasn't the type to go running to the cops over a personal problem. But he also knew that Brent Garrison was a grade A a-hole who'd had it coming for a long time. For what it's worth, he said, the guy he beat up at Murphy's is pressing charges. Broken nose, 3 stitches. Brent's looking at attack and battery, maybe worse if the DA wants to make an example. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Just remember, Ray said, standing up as the bartender brought his coffee, there's a difference between justice and revenge. Try to stay on the right side of that line. After he left, I finished my beer and headed home. The house felt different now. Bigger, emptier, like a stage set after the actors had gone home. Leah's car wasn't in the driveway, which meant she was probably at her sister's place across town, crying into a bottle of wine and planning her counterattack. I walked through the rooms we'd shared for 8 years, looking at everything with new eyes. The wedding photos on the mantle, the furniture we'd bought together, the little touches that had made this place feel like home. It all felt like props now. Artifacts from a marriage that had been dying for longer than I'd wanted to admit. In our bedroom, my bedroom now, I found evidence of her hasty departure. Dresser drawers left open, hangers scattered on the floor, her jewelry box empty. She'd taken the important stuff and left everything else behind, probably planning to come back for it later with reinforcements. That's when I noticed the laptop. Leah's personal computer, sitting on her desk in the corner of the room. She'd been so panicked about getting out that she'd forgotten it. I stared at it for a long moment, knowing that whatever was on that hard drive would either confirm everything I suspected or reveal things I'd never imagined. I opened it up and powered it on. No password protection. Leah had always been careless about security. Her email was still logged in, along with her social media accounts and cloud storage. What I found there was worse than I'd expected. Photos of her and Brent together, dating back 14 months, hotel receipts from weekend trips I'd thought were work conferences, text message screenshots that made my stomach turn. But the worst part was the folder labeled Future Plans. It contained real estate listings for houses in other states, job applications to firms in California and Florida, and a document titled Divorce Strategy that laid out exactly how she planned to take me for everything I was worth. According to her notes, she'd been planning this for 6 months. The affair with Brent was just the beginning. She'd been systematically documenting every argument we'd had, every time I'd raised my voice or slammed a door, building a case for emotional misuse. She'd been photographing my tools and equipment, getting appraisals for my truck and work trailer. She'd even contacted a private investigator about finding dirt on me. The plan was simple: get pregnant with Brent's baby, claim it was mine, then divorce me and move across the country with her new family. I'd be stuck paying child support for a kid that wasn't mine while she started fresh somewhere else. It was brilliant, really. Ruthless and calculating, but brilliant. Too bad for her that I'd found out first. I spent the next hour copying everything to a flash drive, making sure I had backup copies of all the evidence. Then I started making phone calls. The first call was to Tom Morrison, a lawyer I'd done some work for last year. Tom specialized in divorce cases, and he had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting his clients' interests. The second call was to Frankie. Boss, what's up? How do you feel about working late tonight? Depends on what kind of work we're talking about. The kind that involves Brent Garrison's prized Corvette. There was a pause. Then Frankie chuckled. I'll bring my tools. Brent's 19-muscle Corvette Stingray was his pride and joy. A cherry red beauty he'd restored himself over the course of 3 years. He kept it in his garage like a museum piece, only taking it out on special occasions or when he wanted to impress someone. It was probably worth more than most people's houses, which made it the perfect target. Frankie and I waited until 2 in the morning before making our move. Brent was still in jail. His bail hearing wasn't scheduled until Monday morning, and Melanie was staying at her mother's house. The neighborhood was dead quiet. All the good suburban families tucked safely in their beds. Getting into Brent's garage was easier than it should have been. He'd given me the code to his security system years ago, back when we were actually friends, and apparently he'd never bothered to change it. The garage door opener was right where it had always been, hanging on a hook by the kitchen entrance. The Corvette sat under a custom car cover, gleaming even in the dim light from our flashlights. Frankie let out a low whistle. Damn shame, he said. It's a beautiful car. Was, I corrected. We got to work. Nothing that would cause permanent damage. I wasn't looking to commit a felony here. But there were plenty of ways to make Brent's life miserable without crossing any legal lines. Frankie had brought a tube of industrial-strength superglue, the kind we use for cabinet hardware that needed to stay put forever. We applied it liberally to the door handles, the gas cap, and the hood release. By the time it dried, Brent would need a crowbar and a lot of patience to get into his precious car. While the glue set, I worked on the interior. The fish market down on Harbor Street threw out their unsold inventory every Sunday night, and I'd made a special trip to their dumpster before coming here. 3 pounds of rotten mackerel, carefully distributed under the seats and in the air vents. The smell would be memorable. Jesus, boss, Frankie gagged, covering his nose with his shirt. That's just evil. You ain't seen nothing yet. The final touch was a custom bumper sticker I'd had made at the print shop downtown. It read, Honk if you've slept with my wife, in bright yellow letters. I applied it carefully to the rear bumper, making sure it was perfectly centered. We were in and out in 20 minutes, leaving no trace except for the surprise waiting for Brent when he got home. I dropped Frankie off at his apartment and drove home, feeling better than I had in months. Monday morning brought news that Brent had made bail. Mrs. Kowalski called me at 7 a.m. to let me know she'd seen him pulling into his driveway around 6:30, looking absolutely terrible, and driving Melanie's minivan instead of his usual Corvette. I wonder why he's not driving that fancy car of his. She mused, her voice dripping with fake innocence. Maybe it's in the shop, I suggested. Maybe so. Oh, and Evan, I heard from Linda Patterson that your wife was at the bank this morning, trying to get into your joint account. Apparently there was some kind of problem with the paperwork. I smiled. Tom Morrison worked fast. By now, Leah would have discovered that all our joint accounts had been frozen pending the divorce proceedings. She'd also received the papers I'd had served on her at her sister's house, along with a detailed list of all the evidence I'd collected. Thanks for letting me know, Mrs. K. Anytime, dear. You take care of yourself. I was loading tools into my truck when my phone rang. Unknown number. Evan Callahan. You son of a sufferer! Brent's voice was tight with rage, barely controlled. In the background, I could hear what sounded like scraping metal and muffled cursing. Good morning to you too, Brent. How's jail food these days? What did you do to my car? I have no idea what you're talking about. Is there a problem with your car? More scraping sounds, then a loud bang that sounded like someone hitting something with a hammer. The doors are glued shut. There's fish rotting in the vents, And there's a goddamn bumper sticker that says, "Honk if you've slept with my wife," I finished. That's hilarious. Did you put that on there yourself? The line went quiet for a moment. When Brent spoke again, his voice was deadly calm. This is war. You know that, right? Funny, I said. I thought the war started when you decided to screw my wife. But hey, I'm a little slow on the uptake sometimes. I hung up and tossed the phone into my truck. Frankie was waiting for me at the Henderson job site, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. Heard from our friend yet? He asked. Oh yeah, he's not happy. Good. What's next? Next, we let him make the first move. He's angry and stupid right now, which means he's going to do something reckless. When he does, we'll be ready. We spent the morning installing cabinet hardware in the Hendersons' new kitchen. It was detail work that required concentration, which was exactly what I needed to keep my mind off the brewing storm. But around noon, my phone started buzzing with texts from people around town. The first was from Jim Patterson at the hardware store. Brent Garrison was just in here buying bolt cutters and asking about paint remover. Thought you should know. The second was from Mary Chen at the post office. Saw Brent and your wife having a heated conversation in the parking lot. Looked like they were planning something. The third was from Detective Salerno. Heard there might be some trouble brewing. Keep your head down and don't do anything stupid. I showed the messages to Frankie, who just shook his head. Amateurs, he said. If you're going to plan revenge, you don't do it in public where everyone can see you. Maybe that's the point. Maybe they want people to know they're coming for me. Or maybe they're just idiots. Around 3 o'clock, we got our answer. I was in the Hendersons' basement running electrical wire for their new wet bar when I heard car doors slamming in the driveway upstairs. Then voices, angry, arguing voices that I recognized immediately. Leah and Brent had come calling. I climbed the stairs and looked out the front window. They were standing by Brent's borrowed minivan, both of them red-faced and gesturing wildly. Leah was holding what looked like a manila folder, while Brent had a crowbar in his hand. Frankie, I called softly, come take a look at this. He joined me at the window, whistling low when he saw the crowbar. Think they're planning to use that on you? Probably. Or maybe they're going after my truck. We watched as they approached the house. Leah knocked on the front door while Brent circled around toward the backyard where my work truck was parked. I let them wait for a minute, then opened the door with a smile. Leah, what a pleasant surprise. And Brent, shouldn't you be home working on your car? Leah's eyes were blazing with fury. We need to talk. About what? About this. She waved the manila folder at me. About these lies you're spreading around town. I haven't told any lies. Everything I've said is completely true. The hell it is. You never slept with Sarah Garrison, and you know it. You're absolutely right. I made that up to hurt Brent's feelings. But the part about you two having an affair, that's all true. I've got the evidence to prove it. Behind me, I heard the sound of breaking glass. Brent had apparently found my truck. Oops, I said. Sounds like your boyfriend is having a tantrum. Leah pushed past me into the house, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Where is it? Where's what? The evidence. The photos, the emails, whatever you think you have. I followed her into the living room where she was already tearing through drawers and cabinets like a woman possessed. It's not here. Bees, you said you had proof. I do, but I'm not stupid enough to keep it where you can find it. More breaking glass from outside, followed by what sounded like someone taking a crowbar to sheet metal. Frankie appeared in the doorway, his face grim. Boss, you better come see this. We all trooped outside to survey the damage. Brent had really gone to town on my truck. Both headlights were smashed, the windshield was spiderwebbed, and there were dents all along the driver's side where he'd taken the crowbar to it. He was currently working on the tailgate, his face red with exertion and rage. Feel better? I asked. He spun around, the crowbar still in his hands. For a moment, I thought he might actually take a swing at me. But then he seemed to remember that there were witnesses around and that he was already facing attack charges. This is just the beginning, he panted. Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you just committed vandalism in front of 3 witnesses. That's a felony, Brent. Combined with your attack charge, you're looking at serious jail time. His face went pale. Leah grabbed his arm. We're leaving, she said, but this isn't over. You know what? I said, pulling out my phone. You're right. It isn't over. I speed-dialed Detective Salerno while they watched. Ray, It's Evan. I need to report a crime. Brent Garrison just destroyed my truck with a crowbar. Yeah, he's still here. Okay, we'll wait. Brent and Leah exchanged panicked glances. They could hear sirens in the distance, getting closer. You son of a sufferer, Brent whispered. Hey, you're the one who decided to commit crimes in broad daylight. I'm just being a good citizen. They ran for the minivan, but it was too late. Two patrol cars came screaming up the street, blocking their escape route. Within minutes, Brent was in handcuffs again, while Leah stood by helplessly, her carefully planned revenge falling apart around her. Detective Salerno walked over to where I was standing with Frankie, surveying the damage to my truck. Expensive tantrum, he observed. Insurance will cover it, eventually. You know this is going to get worse before it gets better, right? People like this, when they're backed into a corner, they get desperate. I'm counting on it. He gave me a sharp look. Just remember what I said about staying on the right side of the line. Always do. After the cops left with Brent, Leah stood alone in the driveway, looking lost and defeated. Her perfect plan was crumbling. Her lover was going back to jail, and she was pregnant with a baby whose father might not be available to help raise it. This is all your fault, she said. My fault? I'm not the one who decided to cheat. You drove me to it. You and your small-town dreams, your blue-collar mentality. I wanted more than this, Evan. I deserved more. You're right, I said. You deserved exactly what you got. She got in the minivan and drove away, leaving me standing in the wreckage of what used to be my truck. But I wasn't upset. If anything, I was pleased. Brent and Leah had just made a crucial mistake. They'd let their emotions override their judgment. From here on out, they'd be playing defense while I controlled the game. Frankie clapped me on the shoulder. So what's the plan now, boss? Now, we let them think they've won a round. Let them get confident, maybe a little careless. And then we hit them where it really hurts. Which is? I smiled, thinking about the folder full of evidence sitting in Tom Morrison's office safe, and the private investigator I'd hired to dig deeper into Brent's business dealings. Their reputations. In a town this size, reputation is everything. Once that's gone, everything else follows. The beauty of small-town life is that everyone knows everyone else's business. What happened at the Henderson house spread through the local gossip network faster than a wildfire in August. By Tuesday morning, the whole town knew that Brent Garrison had been arrested twice in 4 days and that he'd destroyed my truck in a fit of rage. But I wasn't content to let the rumor mill do all the work for me. I had bigger plans. The private investigator I'd hired was a woman named Carol Winters, a former cop who'd gone into business for herself after 20 years on the force in Albany. She was thorough, discreet, and absolutely ruthless when it came to digging up dirt on cheating spouses and corrupt businessmen. She called me Wednesday morning with her preliminary report. Your friend Brent has been a very busy boy, she said without preamble. I've found evidence of at least 3 other affairs over the past 2 years, including one with a client whose mortgage application he was handling. That sounds like a conflict of interest. It gets better. I think he's been manipulating loan applications to help his girlfriends get better rates. There's also some questionable activity with his expense accounts. Fancy dinners, hotel rooms, weekend trips that don't match up with any legitimate business purposes. I felt a slow smile spreading across my face, and how solid is the evidence? Solid enough to get him fired and probably charged with fraud. I've got bank records, credit card statements, hotel receipts, the works. Your wife was just the latest in a long line of conquests. And Leah? What did you find on her? She's been more careful, but not careful enough. I found evidence that she's been inflating property values on some of her listings, probably to boost her commission percentages. Nothing major, but enough to get her real estate license suspended if the state board finds out about it. Perfect. I had them both dead to rights, and they didn't even know it yet. What's your next move? Carol asked. I'm going to let them think they're winning for a little while longer. Let them get comfortable, maybe make a few more mistakes. Then I'll drop the hammer. Just be careful. Desperate people do desperate things. She was right, of course. But I was counting on that desperation. The more reckless Brent and Leah became, the easier it would be to destroy them completely. I spent the rest of Wednesday working on the Morrison kitchen project, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy while my personal life imploded around me. But it was hard to concentrate when every few hours brought news of some new development in the ongoing drama. Mrs. Kowalski called around lunch to report that Melanie Garrison had been seen loading suitcases into her car. Poor thing looked like she'd been crying for days, she said with obvious relish. Word is she's filing for divorce, too. An hour later, Jim Patterson texted to let me know that Leah had been in the hardware store, asking about security systems and door locks. Seemed real nervous, he wrote. Kept looking over her shoulder like someone was following her. By evening, I had a pretty clear picture of what was happening. Brent's world was falling apart. His wife was leaving him, his job was in jeopardy, and he was facing serious criminal charges. Leah was panicking, probably realizing that her meal ticket was about to disappear and leave her holding the bag, which meant they were both primed to make the kind of mistake I'd been waiting for. I didn't have to wait long. Thursday morning, I was in my workshop when Frankie burst through the door, his face flushed with excitement. Boss, you're not going to believe this. I just saw Brent and your wife breaking into your house. I looked up from the cabinet door I'd been sanding. What? They're in there right now, tearing the place apart. Looks like they're searching for something. I set down my sandpaper and walked to the window that overlooked the back of my house. Sure enough, I could see movement in the kitchen. Shadows passing back and forth behind the curtains. How'd they get in? Broke the lock on the back door. Did a pretty sloppy job of it, too. I pulled out my phone and called Detective Salerno. Ray, it's Evan. I need to report a break-in. Yeah, they're still inside. No, I'm not going to confront them. I'll wait for you guys. While we waited for the police, I set up my phone to record video through the workshop window. Whatever Brent and Leah were doing in there, I wanted it documented. They were inside for almost 20 minutes before the patrol cars arrived. When they finally came out, they were both carrying boxes and looking frustrated. They'd obviously found whatever they were looking for, but from their expressions, it wasn't what they'd hoped. The cops caught them loading the boxes into Leah's car. From my vantage point in the workshop, I could see the whole arrest unfold. Brent trying to run and being tackled in my driveway, Leah screaming that it was her house too and she had a right to be there. Detective Salerno came to find me after they'd been taken away. What do you think they were looking for? He asked. Probably the evidence I've been collecting on their affair. They know I have something on them, but they don't know what or where I'm keeping it. Did they find anything? Nothing important. I moved all the real evidence out of the house weeks ago. Ray nodded approvingly. Smart. But this is the second time we've arrested Brent this week. The DA's going to want to make an example of him. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. After the police left, I walked through my house to assess the damage. They'd been thorough, but not destructive. Drawers pulled out, closets searched, furniture moved around. They'd obviously been looking for something specific, probably hoping to find the laptop or documents that would prove their affair was real. What they'd found instead was a carefully prepared selection of fake evidence, photos that had been digitally altered, printed emails with false timestamps, hotel receipts from places I'd never been. I'd planted it all weeks ago, knowing that eventually they'd get desperate enough to come looking for it. The real evidence was safely locked away in Tom Morrison's office, along with Carol Winters' investigation report and a detailed plan for the final phase of my revenge. Friday morning brought the news I'd been waiting for, Mrs. Kowalski called at 7 a.m., practically vibrating with excitement. Evan, dear, you'll never guess what happened. Brent Garrison got fired yesterday afternoon. They marched him right out of the bank with security guards and everything. No kidding. And that's not all. I heard from Linda Patterson that the State Real Estate Board is opening an investigation into your wife's business practices. Something about falsified property appraisals. I smiled, thinking about the anonymous tip that Carol Winters had submitted to the board earlier in the week. Sounds like they're both having a rough time. Oh, it gets better. Melanie Garrison cleaned out their joint bank accounts before she left town. Took every penny and moved back to her mother's house in Buffalo. Brent's been staying at that cheap motel out by the highway. Perfect. Brent was broke, jobless, and facing multiple criminal charges. Leah was under investigation and about to lose her real estate license. They were both desperate, which meant they were both vulnerable. It was time for the final act. I spent Friday afternoon making preparations. Phone calls to key people around town, arrangements with Frankie and a few other allies, and one very important conversation with Detective Salerno. I think they're going to try something big this weekend, I told him. They're backed into a corner with nothing left to lose. What kind of something? I'm not sure yet, but when it happens, I want to make sure you're ready to respond quickly. Just don't do anything that's going to get you arrested, too. Wouldn't dream of it. Saturday evening, I got the call I'd been expecting. Unknown number, but I knew who it was before I answered. Evan, Leah's voice was tight with stress and exhaustion. Hello, Leah. How's the motel? We need to talk. I thought we covered everything pretty thoroughly last time. This is different. This is about making a deal. I paused, letting her think she had my attention. What kind of deal? Meet us at the old warehouse on River Street, 9 o'clock. Come alone. And why would I want to do that? Because if you don't, we're going to make your life very, very difficult. We've got nothing left to lose, Evan. That makes us dangerous. The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a moment, then started making calls. The warehouse on River Street had been abandoned for 5 years, ever since the textile company that owned it went bankrupt. It was the perfect place for a confrontation. Isolated, no witnesses, plenty of room for whatever they had planned, which was exactly why I had no intention of going there alone. At 8:30, I pulled into the parking lot behind Murphy's Tavern, where Frankie was waiting with 3 other guys from my crew. They were all veterans of various construction site disputes, and they knew how to handle themselves in a tight situation. You sure about this, boss? Frankie asked. Sounds like it could be a trap. Oh, it's definitely a trap, but not the kind they're expecting. We drove to the warehouse in 2 trucks, parking a block away and approaching on foot. The building was dark except for a single light in one of the ground floor windows. Brent's borrowed minivan was parked by the loading dock. I sent Frankie and the others around to cover the back exits, then walked through the front door alone, my phone recording everything. Brent and Leah were waiting in the middle of the empty warehouse floor, both of them looking haggard and desperate. Brent had a baseball bat in his hands, while Leah clutched a manila folder. Glad you could make it, Brent said, his voice echoing in the empty space. Wouldn't miss it. What's this about? Leah stepped forward, holding up the folder. This is about the evidence you think you have on us. We know you've been spreading lies around town, trying to destroy our reputations. The only lies I've told are about sleeping with Sarah Garrison. Everything else is completely true. Prove it, Brent snarled. Show us this evidence you keep talking about. I smiled and pulled out my phone. Actually, I've got something better. I've got the real story. I hit play on a video file that Carol Winters had prepared for me. It was a compilation of security camera footage from various hotels and restaurants around town, showing Brent and Leah together over the past year. The timestamps were clear, the images were undeniable, and the audio quality was perfect. Their faces went white as they watched themselves on the small screen, their affair laid out in high-definition detail. Where did you get this? Leah whispered. Does it matter? The point is, I've got enough evidence to destroy both of you completely. Your affair, Brent's loan fraud, Leah's property appraisal schemes, it's all documented and ready to go public. Brent raised the baseball bat, his knuckles white with rage. You son of a sufferer. Careful, Brent. Attack with a deadly weapon is a felony. Combined with your other charges, you're looking at serious prison time. That's when I heard the sirens. Detective Salerno had been monitoring the situation from a distance, waiting for my signal. When I'd sent him the agreed-upon text message, he'd moved in with backup. The warehouse doors burst open, and suddenly the place was flooded with cops. Brent dropped the bat and raised his hands, while Leah just stood there in shock. Evan Callahan? Salerno called out. You okay? Just fine, Ray, though I think these two might need some legal advice. As they cuffed Brent and Leah, I walked over to where the manila folder had fallen. Inside were copies of the fake evidence I'd planted in my house, the altered photos and forged documents they'd stolen during their break-in. Looking for this? I asked, holding up the folder. Leah's eyes filled with tears. Why are you doing this to us? I'm not doing anything to you. You did this to yourselves the moment you decided to betray me. The baby isn't my problem anymore. As they were led away in handcuffs, I felt a strange sense of completion. It had taken months of planning, weeks of careful execution, and more patience than I'd known I possessed. But in the end, justice had been served. The warehouse fell quiet again, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the satisfaction of a job well done. The aftermath of the warehouse confrontation spread through town like a shockwave. By Monday morning, everyone knew that Brent Garrison and Leah Callahan had been arrested for attempted attack, breaking and entering, and a host of other charges that were still being sorted out by the district attorney's office. But I wasn't done yet. Carol Winters had been busy over the weekend. putting the finishing touches on her investigation. Monday afternoon, she delivered her final report to my lawyer's office, along with a stack of evidence that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. Brent's been running a loan fraud scheme for at least 2 years, she explained, as we sat in Tom Morrison's conference room. He's been approving mortgages for unqualified buyers in exchange for cash payments and sexual favors. I've documented at least 8 cases where he violated federal banking regulations. Tom whistled low as he flipped through the documents. This is enough to put him away for 10 to 15 years. And Leah? She's been working with him on some of the real estate deals, inflating appraisals, hiding property defects from buyers, steering clients toward Brent's bank in exchange for kickbacks. The state licensing board is going to have a field day with this. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. So what happens now? Now we turn everything over to the authorities and let justice take its course, Tom said. But first, we need to talk about your divorce. The divorce proceedings moved quickly once the evidence came to light. Leah's lawyer tried to argue that she deserved half of our assets, but it was hard to make that case when his client was facing multiple felony charges. In the end, she agreed to a settlement that gave me the house, the business, and most of our savings in exchange for not pressing additional charges. The baby she was carrying would never be my responsibility, legally or otherwise. Brent's situation was even worse. The FBI had gotten involved once they learned about the mortgage fraud, and they were building a case that could send him to federal prison for decades. His assets were frozen, his professional licenses were revoked, and his reputation was destroyed beyond repair. But the best part was yet to come. 2 weeks after the warehouse incident, the whole sordid story hit the local newspaper. The reporter, a young woman named Jennifer Walsh, had done her homework. She'd interviewed witnesses, reviewed court documents, and pieced together a narrative that read like a soap opera. Local mortgage broker arrested in fraud scheme was the headline, with a subheading that read, Affair with client's wife leads to discovery of widespread corruption. The article laid out everything in excruciating detail. The affair, the fraud, the attempts at intimidation, and the final confrontation at the warehouse. It painted Brent as a huntry businessman who'd use his position to exploit vulnerable clients, and Leah as a willing accomplice who'd betrayed her husband for money and status. The story was picked up by regional newspapers and even made it onto a few local TV news broadcasts. Within days, Brent Garrison and Leah Callahan were the most notorious people in our little town. I was portrayed as the wronged husband who'd fought back against corruption and betrayal. The article mentioned my contracting business by name, describing me as a hardworking local businessman who uncovered the scheme after discovering his wife's affair. The publicity was better than any advertising I could have bought. My phone started ringing with calls from new clients who'd read the story and wanted to hire the guy who took down those crooks. My schedule filled up for the next 6 months, and I had to turn away work for the first time in my career. But the real vindication came from the community response. People I barely knew stopped me on the street to shake my hand and tell me they were proud of what I'd done. Mrs. Kowalski organized a neighborhood potluck dinner in my honor, which half the town attended. Even Detective Salerno pulled me aside to say that I'd handled the situation exactly right. You could have gone off the deep end, he said. Could have done something stupid and violent. Instead, you used your head and let the system work. That takes real character. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place 3 weeks later when Melanie Garrison filed for divorce and moved back to Buffalo permanently. She'd found out about all of Brent's affairs, not just the one with Leah, and she was done being married to a cheating, lying criminal. She also filed a civil lawsuit against him for emotional distress and fraud, seeking half of everything he'd ever owned. Since most of his assets were already frozen by the FBI, it meant he'd be starting over from scratch even if he managed to avoid prison, which he wouldn't. The federal prosecutors offered him a plea deal, 15 years in exchange for cooperating with their investigation into other corrupt mortgage brokers in the region. He took it because the alternative was risking a trial that could have sent him away for life. Leah got 5 years for her role in the real estate fraud, plus probation and community service. She'd also lost her real estate license permanently and would never be able to work in the industry again. The baby she was carrying would be born while she was in prison. As for me, I was finally free. Free from a marriage that had been dying for years. Free from a best friend who'd never really been a friend at all. Free from the anger and betrayal that had been eating at me for months, I kept the house, expanded my business, and started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but it felt good to have options for the first time in almost a decade. 6 months after the warehouse confrontation, I was working on a kitchen renovation for a family that had moved here from the city. They'd read about me in the newspaper and specifically requested my services, saying they wanted to support a local business owner who stood up for what was right. I was installing their new granite countertops when my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "I hope you're happy." From Gabby, it read. "You destroyed everything I worked for." I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without responding. Leah was probably calling from prison, using someone else's phone to try to get under my skin one last time. But her words didn't hurt anymore. If anything, they made me smile. 'Cause I was happy. Happier than I'd been in years. I'd taken two people who'd betrayed me in the worst possible way, and I'd made them face the consequences of their actions. Not through violence or legal revenge, but through patience, planning, and a willingness to let the truth speak for itself. It had taken months to execute, but it had been worth every sleepless night and every moment of doubt. The house was quiet that evening as I sat on my back deck with a beer, watching the sun set over the mountains. No more lying, cheating wife. No more backstabbing best friend. No more pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Just peace and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, if you're smart enough and patient enough, the good guys really do win in the end. I raised my beer bottle in a silent toast to the empty yard, thinking about all the people who'd supported me through the worst period of my life. Frankie and my crew, Detective Salerno, Mrs. Kowalski, and the other neighbors who'd become my unofficial intelligence network. Tom Morrison and Carol Winters, who'd helped me build an airtight case. And I thought about Brent and Leah, probably lying in their respective prison cells and wondering how their perfect plan had gone so wrong. The truth was, they'd never had a chance. From the moment I'd first suspected their affair, I'd been 3 steps ahead of them. While they were focused on their immediate gratification, I'd been playing a longer game. While they were making emotional decisions, I'd been thinking strategically. They'd underestimated me because they'd seen what they wanted to see, a boring, predictable contractor who was too naive to realize what was happening under his own nose. What they'd failed to understand was that being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have in any conflict. It lets you operate in plain sight while your enemies dismiss you as harmless. By the time they realized their mistake, it was far too late to do anything about it. I finished my beer and headed inside, already thinking about tomorrow's work schedule. The Henderson project was wrapping up, but I had 3 new jobs starting next week. Business was booming, my reputation was solid, and my future looked brighter than it had in years. As I locked the door behind me, I thought about the last thing I'd said to Leah at the warehouse, right before the police took her away. "You did this to yourselves." It was true then. And it was true now. Every choice they'd made, every lie they'd told, every betrayal they'd committed had led them inexorably to that moment. I hadn't destroyed their lives. I'd simply revealed the truth about who they really were. And sometimes, the truth is the most devastating weapon of all. 3 months later, I was putting the finishing touches on what had become the most successful year of my contracting career. The publicity from the Brent and Leah scandal had brought me more business than I could handle, and I'd hired 2 additional crew members just to keep up with demand. I was installing crown molding in the Patterson family's dining room when Detective Salerno stopped by the job site. He looked tired but satisfied, the way cops look when they've finally closed a big case. "Got a minute?" he asked. I set down my nail tool and followed him outside to his unmarked car. "Thought you'd want to know. We just wrapped up the federal investigation into Brent's mortgage fraud scheme. Turns out it was bigger than we thought." "How much bigger?" 12 other mortgage brokers across 3 states. They were running a coordinated operation, approving fraudulent loans and splitting the kickbacks. Total damages are estimated at around $25 million. I whistled low. And Brent was part of all that? Right in the middle of it. His cooperation helped us roll up the entire network. Ray paused, studying my face. "He's going to testify against the ringleaders in exchange for a reduced sentence. Probably looking at 8 to 10 years instead of 15. Still a long time. Long enough. And there's something else. The Sufferer's Compensation Fund is going to cover the damages to your truck and your house, plus a little extra for your trouble. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $15,000. Consider it a thank you from the federal government for being a good citizen. After Ray left, I stood in the Pattersons' driveway for a long moment, staring at the check. It wasn't about the money. I was doing fine financially. It was about validation, official recognition that I'd done the right thing, even when it would have been easier to just walk away. That evening, I drove out to Murphy's Tavern for the first time since the whole mess had started. The place was packed with the usual crowd of construction workers and retirees, but conversation died when I walked in. For a moment, I thought there might be trouble. Not everyone in town had been happy about the way things had played out. Then someone started clapping. It was old Mike Sullivan, a retired electrician who'd been coming to Murphy's every night for 20 years. The applause spread through the bar until everyone was on their feet, cheering and whistling. "Speech!" someone yelled. I held up my hands, embarrassed but touched by the display. "I'm not much for speeches." "Come on, Evan," called out Jenny Murphy, the bar owner's daughter. "Say something." I looked around the room at all these people I'd known for years, neighbors, clients, fellow tradesmen who understood the value of honest work and keeping your word. "All I did was tell the truth," I said finally. "Sometimes that's enough." The crowd erupted again, and suddenly everyone wanted to buy me a drink. I stayed for an hour, accepting congratulations and listening to stories from other people who'd been cheated or betrayed, but that hadn't known how to fight back. "You showed us it could be done," said Tom Henderson, whose kitchen I'd just finished. "You proved that the little guy can win if he's smart about it." When I finally left the bar, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of the anger and betrayal that I'd been carrying around was finally gone, replaced by something better. The knowledge that I'd faced the worst thing that had ever happened to me and come out stronger on the other side. The next morning brought unexpected news. Mrs. Kowalski called while I was having coffee, her voice practically vibrating with excitement. "Evan, dear, you'll never guess what I just heard from my sister in Buffalo." "What's that, Mrs. K?" "Melanie Garrison is getting remarried to a lovely man she met at her church, a widower with 2 children who works as a high school principal." I smiled, genuinely happy for her. Melanie had been an innocent sufferer in all of this, and she deserved a chance at happiness with someone who would treat her right. Good for her. And that's not all. She's pregnant again, due in the spring. Isn't that wonderful? It was wonderful. Melanie would have the family she'd always wanted, with a man who would actually be faithful to her. Meanwhile, Brent was sitting in federal prison, probably just now beginning to understand what he'd thrown away. The irony wasn't lost on me. Later that week, I got a call from Tom Morrison with the final details of my divorce settlement. Leah had signed all the papers from prison, officially ending our 8-year marriage, and giving me clear title to everything we'd built together. She tried to contest the custody arrangement one more time, Tom said. Wanted to make sure you couldn't claim any rights to the baby. I hope you told her that was never a concern. I did. Funny thing is, she seemed almost disappointed that you weren't going to fight for it. I thought about that conversation for a long time afterward. Maybe, in some twisted way, Leah had wanted me to care about the baby she was carrying. Maybe she'd expected me to be the kind of man who would step up and take responsibility, even for another man's child. But that would have required her to understand who I really was, and she'd never bothered to learn that during our entire marriage. The final piece of closure came 6 months later when I received a letter forwarded through my lawyer's office. The return address was a women's correctional facility downstate, and the handwriting on the envelope was unmistakably Leah's. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Evan," it began, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to write this before the baby comes. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, and I want you to know that I'm sorry, not just for the affair, but for everything. For taking you for granted, for thinking I deserved better than what we had, for believing that happiness was something I could find outside our marriage, instead of something we could build together. I know it's too late for apologies, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I lost when I lost you. You were a good husband, and I was too selfish and stupid to appreciate it. I hope you're happy. I hope you find someone who deserves you. The baby is due next month. It's a girl. I'm going to name her Hope, because even in here, I have to believe that good things are still possible. Take care of yourself, Leah." I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. It didn't change anything, too much had happened for that. But it was something, a small acknowledgement that maybe she'd learned something from the wreckage of her life. A few weeks later, Mrs. Kowalski reported that Leah had given birth to a healthy baby girl. The child would be raised by Leah's sister until Leah got out of prison, which wouldn't be for another 4 years. By then, Hope would be old enough to ask questions about her father. I wondered what Leah would tell her about Brent Garrison, the man who'd destroyed so many lives in pursuit of his own selfish desires. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I was building a new life, one honest job at a time. I'd started dating Sarah Chen, Allison's cousin, who worked as a nurse at the local hospital. She was kind, intelligent, and completely unimpressed by the notoriety I'd gained from the scandal. "You did what anyone would do," she said when I told her the whole story. "You stood up for yourself. Not everyone sees it that way. Then they don't know you very well." She was right. The people who mattered, my friends, my clients, my community, understood that I'd simply refused to be a sufferer. I'd use my brain instead of my fists, patience instead of rage, and the legal system instead of vigilante justice. It had taken longer than violence would have, but the results were infinitely more satisfying. On a cold December evening, exactly 1 year after Brent's barbecue party, I was working late in my shop when I heard a car pull into my driveway. I looked out the window and saw Sarah's Honda Civic, steam rising from the exhaust in the frigid air. She came into the shop carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the smile that had first caught my attention 6 months ago. "Thought you might need this," she said, handing me one of the cups. "You're a lifesaver." We stood there in comfortable silence, surrounded by the tools and materials of my trade. The workshop that had once been my refuge from a failing marriage was now simply a place where I did good work for fair pay. "Any regrets?" Sarah asked suddenly. "About what? About how you handled everything? About destroying their lives?" I thought about it for a moment, considering the question seriously. Brent was serving 8 years in federal prison. Leah was in state prison with 4 years left on her sentence. Their reputations were ruined, their careers were over, and their futures were permanently damaged. "No," I said finally, "no regrets at all." Even though they have a child together? Especially because of that. That little girl deserves better than having criminals for parents. Maybe this will teach them to make better choices. Sarah nodded, understanding in a way that surprised me. Sometimes people need to face consequences before they can change. Sometimes they do. We finished our coffee and locked up the shop together. As we walked toward the house, Sarah slipped her hand into mine. "So what's next?" she asked. "Next, we go inside and I make you dinner. Tomorrow, I finish the Hendricks bathroom project. Next week, I start on the new edition for the Pattersons. And after that, I stop walking and turn to face her, seeing my future reflected in her dark eyes. After that, we'll see what happens. But whatever it is, it'll be honest, it'll be real, and it'll be built to last." She smiled and kissed me, right there in my driveway under the winter stars. It was a perfect moment, unmarked by lies or betrayal or hidden agendas. As we walked into my house together, I thought about the toast I'd made at Brent's party all those months ago. I'd called it the last toast, but I'd been wrong. This was the last toast, not to endings, but to beginnings. Not to revenge, but to redemption. Not to the past, but to the future I was building one honest day at a time. And it tasted sweeter than anything I'd ever experienced before.